My name is Mallory Keene. I am 29 years old, and the first sign that my parents were planning to take over my house was a tape measure stretched across my guest bedroom floor. I was not supposed to see it. A client meeting had been canceled, so I returned to my townhouse in Raleigh nearly 3 hours early. The front door was unlocked, even though I clearly remembered securing it that morning. Inside, cabinet doors stood open, several boxes were stacked beside the staircase, and my father was measuring the wall where my desk had always been. My mother was holding one of my private bank statements when she noticed me. Neither of them looked embarrassed. They only looked annoyed that I had interrupted them. I asked why they were inside my house while I was at work. My mother placed the statement on the counter and calmly told me they only used the spare key when they needed to. My father folded the tape measure and said, "We are your parents. Stop acting like strangers broke in." I could have yelled. I could have demanded the key back and forced them out. Instead, I looked at the boxes again. One was labeled kitchen. Another said bedroom linens. Then I noticed an envelope on my table addressed to my mother at my home address. They had not come to clean or check on me. They were preparing for something they had never bothered to discuss with me. I smiled, told them I needed to finish some work, and waited until they left. That night, I packed my important documents, turned off my location sharing, and made one phone call. By sunrise, my parents still had their copied key, but the life they thought they controlled was already gone. Before I tell you what happened when they returned with a moving truck, tell me what the weather is like where you are, and whether it matches your mood today. The call I made that night was not to the police, a lawyer, or anyone in my family. I called Nadia Flores, my manager, because 2 weeks earlier she had offered me a transfer to our Richmond office. I had declined at first. Raleigh was comfortable, my townhouse was close to work, and I had spent years convincing myself that living near my parents did not mean they still controlled me. After what I saw inside my house, Richmond felt less like an inconvenience and more like an exit. I told Nadia I wanted the position and asked how quickly the transfer could happen. She heard something in my voice and did not ask questions. She only promised to speak with human resources in the morning. That was the beginning of my disappearance, but my parents had been preparing me for it for years. Growing up, privacy was treated like proof of guilt. My bedroom door could not stay locked. My mother read notes from friends because parents had to know who influenced their children. My father checked the phone bill and questioned every unfamiliar number. If I asked them to stop, they acted hurt. If I became angry, they said my reaction proved I was hiding something. By adulthood, I had learned that keeping peace meant surrendering small pieces of myself before anyone demanded them. When I rented the townhouse in North Raleigh, I believed distance would fix what conversation never had. It was a quiet 2-bedroom place with a narrow staircase, a fenced patio, and a garage barely wide enough for my car. I paid the deposit, chose every piece of furniture, and spent my first night eating takeout on the floor. A week later, my parents visited. My mother, Gwen, praised the kitchen and immediately suggested where I should move things. My father, Russell, tested the windows, checked the smoke detectors, and asked about the garage battery. Before leaving, they requested a spare key for emergencies. I hesitated, and my mother said she would never forgive herself if something happened and they could not reach me. I handed it over. Soon, small things began changing. Soup appeared in my refrigerator. Laundry was folded on the guest bed. Mail was sorted, and one bank envelope had been opened. My father left notes about the thermostat, air filter, and water heater. Each time I asked them to call first, they said they did not want to interrupt me at work. Every violation arrived disguised as a favor. Then the intrusions grew bolder. My mother rearranged the pantry and threw away food she considered unhealthy. My father moved documents from my desk. A framed college photo disappeared because my mother said it did not match the room. One Monday, the doorbell camera was turned toward the brick wall. They also knew my work schedule too well. They came during meetings, client visits, or the afternoon I drove to the regional office. Then the guest room changed. My desk had been pushed toward the window, the sleeper sofa had been opened, and pencil marks appeared near the baseboard. My mother claimed my father was only checking whether a larger bed would fit. A few days later, mail arrived at my address in her name. Then came another envelope, and another. My father asked whether the garage could hold boxes. My mother asked if the homeowners association allowed overnight parking. When I asked them to return the key, they acted betrayed. My mother said, "We only use it when we need to." My father added, "We are your parents." Eventually, she placed one brass key on my table. After they left, I emailed them that they were not permitted to enter unless I invited them or there was immediate danger. My mother replied that she was disappointed by my lack of trust. My father said nothing. 3 days later, an alert appeared on my phone. Front door opened. The returned key was inside my locked desk. I opened the camera feed and watched my parents enter with another copy. I did not call them while they were inside. A year earlier, I would have demanded an explanation and spent an hour defending my right to be upset. Instead, I closed my office door and watched. My mother entered first with a shopping bag. My father followed with a tape measure and notebook. They moved through the house like people inspecting property they expected to occupy. She photographed the refrigerator. He measured the garage, wrote down dimensions, and went upstairs. The hallway audio caught him saying their bed would fit if my desk was removed. My mother replied that I could work downstairs once they moved in. When he asked whether I would object, she said I would complain at first. But once the movers arrived, I would not embarrass them by saying no in front of everyone. That sentence erased every innocent explanation. They were not considering an emergency stay. They were planning to force a decision by making refusal publicly difficult. I saved the footage in 3 places. My job involved reviewing commercial property claims, and I knew how quickly memories became arguments. Dates mattered. Documents mattered. A timeline mattered. For once, I treated my own life with the seriousness I gave my clients. That evening, my Aunt Bethany called and asked whether I needed help clearing the guest room before my parents moved in. I asked what she had been told. She said my mother had announced that their condo lease was ending, and I had invited them to stay, while they looked for a smaller place. According to the story, I had offered because I worried about them handling another move alone. I told her I had never invited them. She became quiet and asked whether there had been a misunderstanding. I said there had not, and asked her not to confront them yet. After the call, I reviewed old family messages. My mother had complained about condo fees. My father had mentioned parking and wanting a change. I had replied politely and thought nothing of it. Now, every comment made sense. The next morning, I called Caleb Ross, the townhouse property manager. I explained that someone had copied my key and entered after written permission was withdrawn. He arranged new locks, reset the garage code, and noted that no one else was authorized to receive information or access. I replaced the doorbell camera, added a backdoor sensor, and installed a visible living room camera. I wanted proof if they ignored the notice again. Then I prepared to leave. Nadia confirmed that the Richmond position was mine. The transfer included temporary housing and partial moving reimbursement. I accepted before fear could stop me. Human Resources changed my emergency contact and protected my schedule, address, and transfer location. I told only one close friend. Over several nights, I moved my passport, birth certificate, tax files, work equipment, jewelry, photographs, and anything I could not bear to lose. I turned off location sharing, changed passwords, removed myself from the family phone plan, and added new verification codes. I discovered how many old accounts still gave my parents pieces of my life. My mother remained a recovery contact for an old email. My father could view a roadside assistance account linked to my car. A shared photo album revealed my weekends. I closed each door. Meanwhile, Bethany sent screenshots. My mother had told relatives the move was settled. My father booked movers for Saturday and reserved storage near my townhouse using my address as their future residence. In one message, my mother wrote that I might resist, but I always needed a push before making the right choice. On Thursday, my cameras recorded them trying the copied key. When it failed, my father checked the back gate. Before leaving, he said they would return Saturday with the movers. Friday afternoon, I signed the transfer documents, ended my lease under the relocation clause, and completed the inspection with Caleb. By evening, the house was empty. I stood in the guest room where they had measured the wall and understood that freedom would not begin when they finally understood me. It would begin when I stopped needing them to. I locked the door, returned the keys, and drove toward Richmond. At 11:47, one final alert appeared. My father was trying the copied key again. My mother asked what they would do if I refused to open the door the next morning. He said, "She will not refuse, once everyone is here." Part 4. The moving truck arrived at 8:12 Saturday morning. Caleb later sent me the security footage. By then, I was in Richmond, sitting on the floor of a furnished corporate apartment with coffee and 2 unopened boxes. My new number was active. My old one was disconnected. My parents were blocked, except on one account preserved for evidence. I did not watch live. I wanted my first morning in a new city to belong to me. The footage showed my father stepping from his car before the truck fully parked. He wore work gloves and carried a folder. My mother arrived with Bethany and 2 cousins who believed they were helping with a move I had approved. Everyone was dressed for lifting. My mother brought breakfast sandwiches and smiled as though the day were a celebration. The truck held furniture, sealed cartons, kitchen equipment, lamps, and a wrapped mattress. They had brought their household. My father inserted the copied key. It did not turn. He tried the old garage code. The keypad flashed red. My mother laughed nervously and told the relatives I must have forgotten to send the new code. Bethany asked why I was absent. My mother said I had an early meeting and told them to begin without me. Another lie, delivered without hesitation. My father called my old number and heard the disconnected message. My mother tried social media. The movers asked where to unload. My father told them to wait, then walked around the house, tested the side gate and looked through a window. The rooms were empty. When he returned, his confidence was gone. Caleb arrived after receiving a security alert. He asked everyone to step away from the door. My father raised the copied key and claimed he had permission to enter. Caleb asked who gave it. My father said his daughter lived there. Caleb told him I no longer did. The lease had ended the previous day, and no one present had authority to enter. My mother demanded my forwarding address. Caleb refused to provide private information. She said they were my parents. He replied that this did not make them parties to the lease. My father said their belongings were supposed to move in. Caleb requested a written agreement. There was none. My mother said family agreements were not always written. Bethany asked whether I had ever truly invited them. My mother avoided answering and said I knew they needed somewhere to stay. One cousin asked why I had moved without telling them. My father called me emotional and tried the key again. Caleb told him to stop. When he pulled on the handle, property security was called. 2 officers arrived, checked Caleb's identification, and explained that the townhouse had been surrendered. My father displayed the copied key as though it proved ownership. One officer asked whether I had told him not to enter. He called it a family disagreement about access. Bethany knew about my email and looked at him sharply. The officer explained that once permission was withdrawn, a copied key did not restore it. My father was ordered to leave and not return without authorization. My mother cried and said her daughter had vanished. Caleb confirmed I had completed the lease termination in person and appeared safe. Instead of feeling relieved, My father demanded my new address and workplace. No one gave it to him. Since the furniture could not be unloaded, the moving company took everything to storage. The shipment required a second unit and extra fees. My parents had also ended their condo lease, expecting to move directly into my townhouse. They now had nowhere prepared to go. My mother asked Bethany if they could stay with her. Bethany offered 2 nights but demanded the truth. In front of everyone, she asked whether I had invited them. My mother answered that I had never said no. Bethany said not saying no was not the same as saying yes, especially when I had never been asked. By 10:30, the truck was gone. The relatives left without unloading a box. My parents drove away with useless keys, a storage bill, and no address for the daughter they expected to corner. They called my workplace, but human resources followed the privacy instructions. My mother later posted that I had disappeared and asked for prayers. She omitted the copied keys, moving truck, and false invitation. For a few hours, her version worked. Then Bethany commented that I was an adult who had moved voluntarily. My mother deleted the post within minutes. By Sunday, my parents were telling relatives I might be having a breakdown. It was the only explanation that allowed them to remain innocent. In their version, I had abandoned my home, changed my number, left my job, and cut off my family for no rational reason. They did not mention my promotion, written warning, copied key, or the plan to move into my house without consent. My father suggested someone at work had manipulated me. My mother said I was overwhelmed and ashamed to ask for help. Every explanation made me weak or confused. None allowed me to be an adult who had made a deliberate choice. They requested a welfare check. Because I had expected this, I had already confirmed through proper channels that I was safe. The only information they received was that I was an adult, had been located, and did not wish to reveal my location. My mother should have felt relieved. Instead, she demanded my address. My father asked whether parents could be denied information about their own child. He was reminded that I was 29. Bethany called and told me my parents were staying in her guest room until Monday, but still claimed I had approved the move. I sent her only evidence relevant to that lie: the email withdrawing permission, the video of them entering with a copied key, the clip in which my mother said I would not refuse once the movers arrived, the message telling Bethany I had invited them. I did not send private childhood stories or try to humiliate them. I wanted one event understood clearly enough that it could not be rewritten. Bethany apologized for believing my mother's story and asked whether she could show the proof to the relatives involved. I agreed on the condition that nothing be posted publicly. That evening, she created a private family message. At first, relatives reacted cautiously. A cousin said he assumed I knew. An uncle asked whether the audio lacked context. Bethany replied that she had been present when my parents arrived with the truck and heard them change their story. Another relative asked why they copied a key after I requested it back. My father left the group. My mother wrote about sacrifice, aging, and rejection. Bethany asked one question: "Did Mallory invite you to move into her house? Yes or no?" My mother did not answer. That silence damaged their credibility more than any insult could have. The consequences followed quickly because their plan depended on other people helping them. Bethany would not host them beyond 2 nights. The cousins refused to assist with another move. A relative with a rental property required a normal deposit and references, which my father found insulting. They eventually rented a furnished apartment month to month at a high cost. Their furniture stayed in storage. They paid for the truck delay, 2 storage units, short-term rent, and another future move. Those were not punishments I invented. They were the price of making permanent decisions based on a home they had never been offered. My mother continued searching for me through old friends, a former neighbor, and even a dentist I had used years earlier. My father contacted the corporate office claiming he needed my address for tax documents. Every attempt was blocked and documented. Human resources warned them that repeated calls were disruptive. Some relatives urged me to contact them because my mother was not sleeping. Others said I had made my point. I sent the same response each time. I am safe. My location is private. Please do not carry messages or request information for them. Most respected it. 2 did not, and I stopped responding to them as well. 3 weeks after the truck incident, I sent my parents a certified letter through a forwarding service. It stated that I was safe, employed, and living independently. They were not to contact my employer, friends, former landlord, or relatives to locate me. Future messages could go to a dedicated email account. I wrote that concern did not create consent, and loving intentions did not erase impact. I offered one meeting at a family mediation center if they brought every copy of my key, signed a statement admitting I had never invited them to move in, and stopped telling people I had disappeared because of a crisis. My father replied with 6 paragraphs about everything he had done for me. He addressed none of the conditions. I did not answer. My mother first said no parent should sign a document to speak with a child. 2 days later, she wrote again. They would attend. The mediation room was on the 2nd floor of a community center outside Raleigh. It had beige walls, a round table, 4 chairs, and a box of tissues. I chose it because my parents could not turn the meeting into a scene in my home, and I could leave whenever I wanted. Bethany attended as a witness. A mediator named Carla explained that her role was to keep the conversation focused and safe. I arrived after my parents so they could not follow me from the parking lot. My mother stood when I entered. She looked tired, and I felt the old reflex to comfort her. Then I remembered her planning where to put her bed in my guest room. I sat across from them. My father began by saying I had humiliated them, cost them thousands, and allowed the family to treat them like criminals. Carla reminded him that each person would have uninterrupted time. My mother said they had believed I was missing and asked how I could let them suffer. I told her authorities had confirmed I was safe within 24 hours. What she lacked was not proof of safety. She lacked access to my location. Those were different things. My father said parents had a right to know where their children lived. I asked at what age that right ended. He said family did not work by age. I opened my folder. First came the message requesting an emergency key, then my written limit on its use, then the email withdrawing permission entirely. My father said emails could be misunderstood. I placed the returned key beside the documents and played the video of them entering 3 days later with another copy. He said they were only checking the house. I showed him measuring the garage and guest room. I played the audio about moving my desk and the clip in which my mother said I would not embarrass them by refusing once the movers arrived. The room fell silent. Next came the redirected mail, moving reservation, message to Bethany, and footage from Saturday morning. Each piece closed another escape route. They could not call it a misunderstanding because the plan depended on my ignorance. They could not call it an emergency because the truck was booked in advance. My father finally said they needed help because their condo had become too expensive. I said asking for help would have been a conversation. They had created a crisis and assigned me the responsibility for solving it. My mother cried and admitted she believed I would agree once I understood. I asked why she had not asked first. She answered quietly, "Because you might have said no." That was the most honest sentence she had ever spoken. I told her my right to say no was exactly what she had tried to remove. My father said they had sacrificed everything for me. I told him raising a child did not create permanent ownership of the adult she became. Food, shelter, and education were not loans repaid with access to my home. Bethany said they had also used the family as pressure. She would never have come with the truck if she knew the truth. Carla moved us to future contact. For 6 months, there would be no calls, visits, workplace messages, online posts, or contact through others. They would not search for my address. They could use only the dedicated email, and I was not required to answer. After 6 months, I might consider one scheduled monthly call if every condition had been respected. Any in-person meeting would happen in public. They would never receive another key. My mother asked whether they would ever visit my home. I said trust would depend on repeated behavior, not one meeting. My father called the rules punishment. I said punishment caused pain, while consequences prevented the same harm from happening again. Carla asked for every copied key. My father placed one on the table and claimed it was the only one. My mother glanced at him. Carla asked again. He became defensive and said the locks had changed, so it did not matter. I said, honesty mattered. My mother removed a second key from her purse. My father then pulled a third from his wallet. 3 copies lay between us. They had returned one while secretly keeping 3. My mother said each had a practical purpose. I asked how many emergencies required separate secret keys. She had no answer. They signed a statement acknowledging that I had never invited them to move in and that future contact depended on the agreed boundaries. I collected the keys, not because they opened anything, but because they represented the trust they had spent while expecting my door to remain open. Before I left, my mother asked whether I hated them. I said no. I still loved them, but I no longer loved them more than I respected myself. I walked out first. For once, their lack of information was not my problem to solve. The first month of no contact felt less peaceful than I expected. My phone was quiet, but my mind was not. I checked the dedicated email too often, watched unfamiliar cars near my building, and hesitated before sharing my address with anyone. Every unexpected knock made my shoulders tighten. Freedom did not immediately erase habits created by years of control. It gave me enough space to finally recognize them. I began counseling through my employee assistance program. I had assumed counseling was only for people in crisis or people who could not handle their lives. Instead, it helped me see how often I explained ordinary choices, apologized for slow replies, justified spending my own money, and felt guilty for declining invitations. I realized I often asked for approval when I was only trying to communicate a decision. My parents had entered more than my house. Their expectations had followed me into friendships, work, finances, and every choice that might disappoint someone. Richmond slowly became home. I found a permanent apartment near the river, chose a building with controlled access, and kept the address private. A trusted friend became my emergency contact. I stopped sharing live locations and posted photographs only after leaving a place. I reviewed every old account, removed outdated recovery contacts, and closed anything I no longer used. Those choices were not about living in fear. They were about deciding for myself what information other people received and when they received it. At work, the transfer succeeded. Within 3 months, I handled larger commercial claims and began training a new employee. The skills that helped me organize evidence against my parents also helped me advance professionally. For the first time, I saw my carefulness as a strength, instead of something I had developed only to survive being questioned. My parents remained in their expensive furnished rental while their belongings stayed in storage. 2 moves, storage fees, deposits, short-term rent, and the loss of their previous housing arrangement cost far more than simply asking for help would have. More importantly, relatives no longer accepted their version automatically. They did not abandon my parents, but they stopped rewarding the behavior. When my mother complained that I was cruel, Bethany reminded her of the written agreement. When my father asked an uncle to find my address, the uncle refused and told him the request proved why I was keeping it private. Their greatest consequence was not public shame. It was losing automatic credibility and access to me. They could no longer tell a story about my life and expect everyone to accept it without asking questions. During those 6 months, my father sent several emails. The first blamed me. The next listed their expenses as though I owed reimbursement. Another argued that families should solve problems privately, ignoring that privacy had protected their behavior for years. Near the end, his tone changed. He admitted copying the key was wrong and that he had treated access as a right instead of a privilege. He wrote that he had always believed being responsible for me as a child meant remaining responsible for my decisions as an adult. It was incomplete, but it was the first message that demanded nothing. My mother's change took longer. At first, she described her sadness in detail and asked how I could live, knowing she was suffering. Then she stopped writing for several weeks. When she returned, she said counseling had shown her that fear made her hold people tighter until they pulled away. She admitted she often called control protection because protection sounded loving. Her final letter was specific. Reading my mail was wrong. Entering without permission was wrong. Redirecting mail was wrong. Planning to move in and using relatives as pressure was wrong. Telling people I was unstable was wrong. Love did not excuse any of it. She did not ask me to comfort her or immediately forgive her. I believed that apology because it named the harm instead of asking me to erase it. After 6 months, I agreed to one 30-minute call from a private number. My parents did not ask where I lived. My father began to say he wished I had acted differently, then stopped and admitted he understood why leaving had felt necessary. My mother said she finally understood how fear of losing me had caused her to behave in ways that made losing me more likely. I did not promise forgiveness or pretend trust had returned. I said trust would depend on whether the change continued after the guilt and embarrassment faded. We began speaking once a month. Later, I met them for lunch in a public restaurant between Richmond and Raleigh. They asked about my job but not my office address. They asked whether I liked my neighborhood but not its name. My father looked toward the parking lot when we left, but did not ask which car was mine. Those omissions mattered more than dramatic promises. They showed restraint in the places where they once would have demanded answers. Our relationship did not return to what it had been, and I did not want it to. The old version required me to remain small, available, and easy to supervise so they could feel secure. A healthier relationship required them to tolerate not knowing everything about me. I never gave them another key, and they have never seen my current apartment. Maybe one day they will, but the decision belongs to me, and it will happen only if trust continues to grow. I once believed boundaries were walls built to keep people out. Now I see them as doors with locks. They can open when trust is present and remain closed when it is not. A boundary does not destroy a healthy relationship. It reveals whether the relationship can survive without control. Concern and consent are not the same. Love does not grant ownership of another adult's home, messages, schedule, money, or personal information. When spoken boundaries are ignored, put them in writing, protect passwords and documents, review account access, inform trusted people at work, save evidence and seek professional support. Most importantly, do not create danger simply to teach someone a lesson. My revenge was not pretending I had been harmed or trying to destroy my parents. It was leaving the system that allowed them to keep harming me. They booked the truck, ended their lease, copied the keys, redirected the mail, and lied to the family. I simply stopped standing where they expected me to absorb the consequences. I did not disappear from my life. I disappeared from the role they had written for me. The true victory was the first evening I left my mail on the counter, placed my bag beside it, and went to sleep without wondering who had opened a drawer or walked through my rooms. Freedom sounded like silence behind a locked door, a silence I had chosen. When someone keeps calling control love, you do not have to argue forever or wait for them to agree with your definition. Sometimes the healthiest answer is to close the door, keep the key, and let your life finally belong to you.
We hope you found this story both entertaining and meaningful. This video is completely fictional and intended only for educational and storytelling purposes. We hope it reminds you that a broken promise can teach you to listen more carefully to patterns, actions, and the quiet warnings you once chose to ignore.